The Internet of Things is set to become the fourth industrial revolution. But our next guest here at IPBC 2016 in Barcelona says it's only going to happen if the intellectual property industry comes together and creates the standards needed to make it work.
I think that, as is always the case when you make lots of changes, you don't get everything right. So I would say that we did probably a little too good of a job in some ways of correcting for the perceived abuses, and that some tactical modification is now needed to bring back to the center line the overcorrections that we now know that flowed from the AIA. I do think there's significant risk of really substantially overcorrecting at this point if any more major legislation or more major court decisions were to be put through in the US. In the US, of course, there's been legislation pending in the House, so-called H.R. 9, that would, in my estimation, and I think pretty clearly now represent a dramatic overcorrection that would badly damage the US patent system. So it would include things like a so-called covered customer stay provision that I strongly believe is just not needed in the US. Existing law handles that problem. It would include mandatory fee shifting of attorneys' fees. Well, we had 2 Supreme Court decisions in the US that have caused a tripling, not just 10% more, but 3 times more requests for shifting of fees and about a 2 times actual award of shifting of fees. So dramatic change from Supreme Court decisions. We don't need legislation now that just redundantly fixes a problem the Supreme Court's already fixed and actually causes more litigation, which is what would be the result of that legislation. So there's a whole series, there's rigid portions of H.R. 9 that would deprive judges with their ability to exercise judgment, which is the fundamental role of judges. And I think all of those parts of the legislation, in fact, that whole legislative package has just been completely overcome by events, the AIA taking effect and becoming so effective, as I said, maybe too effective, Supreme Court decisions, Federal Circuit decisions, the Federal Judicial Conference, which made its own set of changes. If you add all of that up, there's absolutely no need for H.R. 9 anymore.
And if you were still Undersecretary of Commerce, would you advise the President not to sign it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd be saying we need to work with Congress and set a new agenda here, because we've clearly corrected the abuses that need to be corrected in the U.S. system. And if anything, some tactical fixes are needed to deal with overcorrection, but we certainly don't need more massive patent reform in the U.S.
Actually, why did you resign the position when all these things were on the table?
Well, we had completed a lot of things, including implementation of the AIA. I stayed in the government a long time by U.S. presidential appointed standards, about double the normal tenure of people in those positions. And I felt like it was time to let some new blood come in and let someone new, bring in a new agenda, and time for me to move back into the private sector.
And to an extent, even with FRAND, we haven't really seen an equilibrium found on what is a fair, reasonable and non-discriminatory price. And I suspect we're not going to solve that in the course of this interview. But could perhaps number 1 step be, to continue your analogy of playing well together in the sandbox, that maybe the industry needs to start by stopping kicking sand in each other's eyes? That we really need a cultural change in order for that dialogue to actually take place.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. That is really a great metaphor. And that's exactly what I've been trying to advocate in China, in India, in the US, everywhere, to say we all need to recognize that we're playing important roles here. The implementers depend on the innovators to provide new innovation for them to make new products that people want to buy. The innovators depend on the implementers to be the vehicles for moving their great technology ideas into the marketplace. So now, who's doing a good job of that? I would look right here in Europe and to say that Etsy is the standard setting body that is still seeking a balance and seeking to promote the requirement, the need for investment and innovation in order to have great standards. And unfortunately, back in my country, the IEEE took the wrong decision and wound up in an extremely controversial and unnecessary move, sending a very clear message that the IEEE no longer appreciates the hard work of innovators and instead has cast their lot with the implementers of standards and said, we're just not going to help or put any stock in the hard work of innovation, and instead, we just favor the interests of the innovators. So that lack of balance, very bad thing. Etsy's approach of maintaining balance, I think much better, avoids kicking sand up in anyone's eyes.
So, and those earlier on when we talked about those tactical adjustments to the US system, would they help to redress that balance, that the US would be on an equal footing with Germany and China?
I think they clearly would. They would help to both substantively restore or ensure balance in the US system, and I think as a matter of tone, right, as a matter of culture, change the message from one in the US right now that's very anti-innovation to one that's more balanced on, yeah, we love implementers and companies that put products in the marketplace, but we also love the little guy that creates the great ideas in the first place.